Full-page video backgrounds are becoming very popular on the web. As you can see, we have content on top of the video. It may not be obvious, but there is also a layer of color with a degree of opacity on top of it so that it is not overpowering, and so you can still read the content on top. As I scroll the page, you see that there is more content on this web page. This video fits very nicely into the viewport or the area of my browser that I am currently working with. This is a very useful way of capturing your audience and showing them more about your product or service. Here we see Adidas is also using a background video. As you can see, it does not occupy the total area of the viewport, and that is fine. It is still effective because it is in a large area that you can easily see when you visit the website. Again, we have content on top of this video. Finally, we have a school that is also using a background video. They have content and other types of interactive material on top of the video, as you can see. Again, it is a very useful and attractive way of promoting a message. I would like to show you the basics behind creating these background videos. The video is created using the HTML5 video tag. It is not inserted similar to a background image. Therefore, in order to place content on top of the video, we need to use positioning. To explain how this is approached, I have a drawing that I will use to help you to understand the concepts. First, I have an HTML element. This element can be a div or it can be a section element. It is the container in which all of the content, the video, and the overlay will be placed. So I have this container. Inside the container, I have another HTML element which contains the content. This can be a section, this can be a div. This contains the content that will be placed on top of the video. I also have the video element itself. Then I have an empty element which is going to be used for the overlay. You don't necessarily need an overlay, but many times you see them used. The overlay will just contain a background color or a gradient with a degree of transparency or an opacity value. You can see that I have another section underneath. This would be the rest of my web page. So you would have more content further down underneath your main section. The goal is to make the content, the video, and the overlay all fit inside this main container, and for the main container to fill in the existing space in the browser. That existing space will either be the entire viewport or a portion of the viewport, as we have seen. So using CSS, I will stretch my main container so that it fills up the width of my browser window and that the height is 100% of my viewport or whatever portion of the height of the viewport I want to use. This is accomplished using a width of 100%. And for the height, we will use the VH unit, 100 VH, which is viewport height. We do not use percents for height. We use VH units. Technically, you could use the VW unit, viewport width, for the width also. However, setting widths at percents work very well. Because we want the video and the overlay to fill the main container, we will also set these properties for those two elements. We want the video to be all the way in the back, we want the overlay to be on top of the video, and we want the content to be on top of that. So we have a stacking order. The only way that it is possible to place one HTML element on top of another is to use positioning. That is the purpose of using positioning, to stack elements on top of each other. So our main container will have a position value of relative. We use relative positioning for the main container because we want to absolutely position the video and overlay to that main container. The relatively positioned container or element does not need to have a top or bottom. It defaults to wherever it is in the normal flow. So we will be stretching out our video to fill our container. The overlay is placed on top of the video, and then the content will be placed on top. So the content is the top layer if you are familiar with Photoshop. Then we have the overlay. Then we have the video. These are all inside the main container. We have changed the width and height using CSS. And by using absolute positioning, we can place the video in the very back, giving it a z-index -2, and then we can absolutely position the overlay on top, and since we want that out front, we'll give that a z-index of -1, and then the content fills the area also due to our CSS width and height properties. Here is a very simple demo using some sample video footage from Shutterstock. All I have is one heading level element and a video and an overlay. I did place a border around the outer container just so you can see it. If I scroll down, you see that there is more content below. I have coded this to fill the entire viewport. However, I don't have to fill the entire viewport. If I set my viewport height units to 80 VH for the height, it will fill up 80% of the viewport. Now I have just changed my color overlay to red. Notice it still has a degree of opacity because I want to be able to see the video. However, you may not even want an overlay. It may look fine without it. Let's take a look at the HTML layout. Here we have our outer container, the section. And as you saw in the diagram, it contains the content, the video, and the overlay. So there are just 3 elements inside here. Of course, I can add more content as desired. This is just more content that would normally exist on your web page. So this is the area where the video background is going to be placed. This is the HTML5 video tag. We need to absolutely position this video so that we can place it in the top left corner of its parent container, which is the section element. We give it a -2 z-index so that it is the farthest in the back. And we want it to fill the screen, so we give it a minimum width and a minimum height of 100%. Our section element, which contains all of the elements that we are using in our video demo, needs to have relative position, and it needs to stretch the entire width and height of the viewport, or as high as we want it. So here we set position relative. We don't need to give it a top or left. It just stays where it is. Our width will be 100%. Our height, because we changed it, is now 80 VH, that is viewport height. If I were to change it back to 100, that would make it stretch 100% of the viewport height. It's similar to setting the height to 100%. However, you couldn't do that without doing something else, and this is the standard today. We are also going to set this as our flex container so that all of the items will be aligned nicely. You also want to set the overflow property to hidden in the event that there is an overflow issue. This outline was purely for my testing to see where my container was. So that was our section. That was our video. This will be a flex item. So we don't need to do anything other than to style it. This is our flex parent here. The last thing we need to do is absolutely position this div, which contains the color, so that it stretches on top of our video. So similar to our outer container, we need to have a position property, but it is a position absolute. We will also set the top to 0 and the left to 0. Our video has these properties also. The background color will be the overlay color. You can use an RGB8 color. You can also use a gradient. Here we have the width to 100% and our height to 100 of our viewport height, which is essentially like 100% of the height. And because I did not use RGBA, I will use an opacity property. Again, the outline was just for my testing. So you can see there is not a lot of HTML. We have our outer section element, our content, our video, and our overlay. And here we have a very interactive interface for our website.